During a disaster, people are going to come to you for assistance. They're going to look to you for assurance, for guidance, and to take care of them in many cases during a disaster and during the recovery phase of a crisis. When we boil down these types of people who are going to come to you in times of need, there are really only two types of people. There are those who will bring an asset to your group or to your own version of the recovery phase, and those who will act as a burden to your group. Today we're going to discuss those types of people and what you can do to better prepare for them. Let's go over the major priorities during a crisis. Security, of course, is going to be number one, depending on the type of crisis that's unfolding. You're going to want to keep a watch. Are the people who are coming to you able to help you keep a watch? Do they know what to look for? Will they just let people into your door or onto your property? Will they alert you in time when a person's coming down the street? How aware are they of the world around them? How forgiving are they of the people around them? Do they consider that everyone is a good person until they show themselves otherwise? Or do they look to people knowing that someone coming down the street, maybe with a weapon in hand, maybe without, may be coming just to take what you have and the goods that are keeping you and your family alive during a disaster? Water is another top priority during a crisis. The human body can only survive 3 days without access to water. And actually, the average person in our society is so far dehydrated on a daily basis that about the first day to the first 1.5 days into a crisis event, they're going to begin to suffer so severely that they can't function on a normal level. So the person that's coming to you during a disaster, are they able to help you procure water? Do they know not just to drink the water that they find, making themselves sick or making another member sick, and then causing another disaster to unfold in your group? Do they know what to do if someone gets a waterborne disease? Do they know how to treat that type of thing? Are they of an able body that they can go down and fetch more water? Do they know how long it needs to boil? These types of things are what you'll need to consider when people come to you during a crisis. Food is another survival item that you have to take into consideration when determining whether someone's going to be an asset or a burden to your group. Are they able to hunt? Do they know wild edibles? Can they forage? Again, are they of an able body that they can get out and at least try to do things to bring more food into your group? Or are they going to be there and only leeching from the food stores that you have on hand? Can they work the garden? Do they know not to just go out and eat and eat and eat like we do in our common Western society? Can they stop themselves from this bad habit and ration themselves in a time of a disaster? These types of things are what we're going to consider when we decide whether we're going to allow a person into our group or not. Someone who doesn't have a good mental capacity for rationing or the ability to and willpower to stop themselves from eating, even in our current time, will make nothing but a burden in the time of a crisis. You have to make sure that if a burden like this comes into your group, that they bring assets of their own or other things that overcome this burden to allow them to take part in your version of the recovery. People who are good at planning in our current time of relative peace in the world will be good at planning during a disaster. They'll be able to set out ideas and go through scenarios and discuss what might happen and how you and your group can better handle those possibilities. These types of people will be real assets to you during a crisis because they'll be able to look at the situation no matter which situation is unfolding, whether it's a pandemic, a biological threat of another nature, civil unrest, martial law, or even a natural disaster. They can look at the events and decide what's likely, or at least plan for what's likely to happen and what's likely to affect you and your group. Communications watch and intelligence gathering is another huge part of whether a person is an asset or a burden during a disaster. Will they take the opportunity when they hear another person on the end of a ham radio, on the end of a CB radio, a GMRS, and will they talk to them without first gathering information? Will they give away your location just because that feeling of help is there, that feeling of relief is there, and they make that mistake? Do they have that sort of willpower to stop? And do you have the plans in place to teach them not to have open communication with people, to teach them that radio communication is used mostly for information gathering during a crisis? Because those that are looking to do harm to others will be using a radio. They'll be using communication to fake people out, to use it in a way that says, we're here to help. This is the U.S. military. Anyone that can hear us, please respond. We're doing rescue and recovery missions. And as soon as a person responds, now they have that location. So will the person that comes into your group have the willpower to stop themselves from responding to that type of event? Do they bring their own communications gear? A ham operator in our current times will be a real asset during a disaster. They understand how ham works. They understand the environmental changes to the radio frequencies. They know what they're looking at as far as how far away a person that's communicating might be. They could maybe do some direction finding by signal recoveries. They could maybe look into signal strengths. They could look into real information building. They might even be able to decipher some Morse code or some other codes that people are going to use, like a cipher during a disaster. Physical asset control is a huge part of every disaster and preparedness plan. When a person comes to you during a crisis, will you give them open and unfettered access to all of your firearms and ammunition? How about your food and water? What about your medicine? Maybe you have narcotics in there and they have an illness that keeps them abusing narcotics. Will you disperse your goods into different locations so that if one physical asset point becomes endangered, you won't lose everything that you have? Take these types of things into consideration during a crisis and think about the people that you allow into your home, especially if they're going to be protecting your family, your wife and your children. Make sure that you can trust them 24 hours a day, in sight and out of sight, with everybody at your group. As people come to your group, will they know first aid? Will they know CPR and the Heimlich maneuver? Will they know what to do in the event of serious trauma? What if someone's bleeding out? Do they have this type of knowledge, or will the burden fall upon you to teach them as soon as they get there? People such as nurses, doctors, paramedics, firefighters, police officers, or even just people who have gained the knowledge themselves will be huge assets to your disaster and preparedness group during a disaster. They'll be able to come to you with this knowledge already, ready to treat, ready to help you in the event of physical and health crisis. These people are who you want in your group. People who know even the most common forms of first aid will help you in the event of trauma. Depending on the type of crisis that you're in, if it's a pandemic or other biological watch, you want people on a health watch that can keep an eye on everybody in the group. Make daily logs of how everyone's feeling. Maybe take the temperature of everyone and keep it on a centralized log. Their symptoms, are they suffering from just the sniffles because they're working as the dew drops at night, or do they have a cold? How are you going to quarantine those people? Will the people that you bring into your group be able to be quarantined without suffering mentally? Will they understand the need for it and the need to stay away from the other members of the group until their symptoms can be proven to either be part of the biological threat or just a common cold? Firearms training and self-defense is another huge asset to your group. Will the person coming to you be afraid to touch a firearm? Will they be proficient with a knife? Will they be proficient with a firearm, or at least able to defend themselves and of an able body that they can take on an attacker or protect somebody else in your group from an attack? Someone who comes to you with this type of training will be a huge asset to your group. On the opposite side of that, someone who comes to you afraid to touch a firearm, maybe decided sometime in their safe life that they could just talk with an attacker rather than handle them physically. That type of person is going to be a burden to you and your group and could endanger the members of your group. So consider who it is that you let into your house and whether they'll protect you while you're sleeping and protect your family, or whether they'll just protect themselves. There are, of course, many more traits that make a person either an asset or a burden to your disaster group. There are things that we use on a homestead environment now, things that make a person an asset to a homestead, or things that make a person a burden. But during a disaster, these traits are inflamed. They're enlarged and more visible, and they become more of an asset to your group or more of a burden on the opposite side. Constantly reassess your survival and preparedness plans. Reassess who you'll let in and the criteria that they must fill to be allowed into your group and to protect or endanger you and your family. This is Brad from Full Spectrum Survival. A special shout out to our Patreon members who make these crisis tips possible. As always, stay safe and keep watch.